Good morning, good afternoon, greetings wherever you are. We're delighted you could join us for this latest edition of the State of the American Traveller. This is the Traveller Segments edition. We're going to get started in 30 seconds or so. So just hold on and we'll rejoin you and kick off the webinar. Again, greetings, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. We've got participants, over 280 participants today from Utah to Gainesville, Baltimore to Vancouver, Quebec to Chattanooga. So wherever you are, thanks very much for joining the State of the American Traveller Segments edition. I'm delighted to be joined by a very good friend and colleague and a very familiar voice on these webinars, Erin Francis Cummings, CEO and founder of Destination Analysts. Erin, where are you today?
Fortunately, I'm home in San Francisco. My kids just started their first week back at school.
It's a very busy time of the year, so we're delighted Erin can be with us to share the insights, takeaways, and results of the latest State of the American Traveller research, this one looking at traveller segments. We've also got a very special guest today. So Kat from Sojourn, Head of Global Destination Solutions. Kat, whereabouts are you in the world?
Hey, I am also in San Francisco, but unfortunately not next to Erin. Next time I will be. It's nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Very good. And a great shot there of El Capitan.
Yeah, it's my first time. It's beautiful.
Very good. So we're going to dive into the research in just a moment, but we want to give very special thanks to our friends and our colleagues at both DMA West and STS, Southeast Tourism Society. A quick shout out to a couple of upcoming events. You can see the PDM courses that are coming up just in the next few weeks in Sacramento, and also the Vendor Showcase again in October, and STS. Sandy Springs, just on the northern outskirts of Atlanta there, is hosting the Group Sales Symposium and their big February Connections event in Little Rock, Arkansas. So the research and the slides are going to be both available on the Miles Partnership and the Destination Analysts websites. We'll come back and share those resources a little bit later. And I think everybody's very familiar with webinars, so please take the opportunity to ask questions. And we'll stop both at the end of Erin's section, Kat's section, and then at the end to answer specific questions. I'll also be online on the GoToMeeting chat, answering specific questions as well. So here's the agenda for today. We're going to look briefly, as we always do, at what are American travelers saying in terms of their travel intentions and sentiment. Really interesting, there's been a lot of news and buzz about the strength of the economy in the US, and Erin's got the very latest figures on that. She's then going to be looking at traveler segments, and we're taking a special look at a number of segments, including our annual look at Generation Z, or Z in some parts of the world. We're then going to ask Kat to join us to talk about a traveler's path to purchase. They've just published their own research and analysis, looking in particular at how travelers are using the myriad of travel resources and sources of information, and they've got some great insights to share. And then finally, I'll summarize a few resources from some recent conferences and conventions with great content from a range of speakers that you can also access online, and we'll wrap up with some final questions and answers. So without further ado, let's pass it over to Erin to talk first about traveller sentiment and then the traveller segments. Erin.
Thank you, Chris and Kat. I'm so thrilled to be sharing and presenting this webinar with you. So the State of the American Traveler Segments Edition, the wannabe marketer in me gets so excited for this edition. But before we get started, let's recap the methodology for the State of the American Traveler. I'm sure that we have some people on, perhaps for the first time. So the State of the American Traveler is a quarterly online survey that we've conducted since 2006. We send a survey invitation out to a nationally representative sample of American adults who are then screened for leisure travel behavior. Each quarter, we collect a total sample of over 2,000 American leisure travelers, and we use this study to keep the industry abreast of traveler sentiment, motivations, and behaviors. And we're going to be spending most of our time today talking about traveler segments, but no matter how much we know about our audiences and their psychology and behaviors, one of the most critical to think about is the environment that they are considering purchasing from us in. So that's why very first we need to look at how Americans are feeling about travel. And sadly, I wasn't able to change the photo this time from the last 2 quarters. I have more meh news again, sadly. But as we have for every edition of this 13-year study, we ask American travelers this summer about their trip volume and spending expectations as they look out over the next 12 months. And about 3 in 10 American travelers are indeed optimistic about their travel in the next year. 31% say they are going to travel more than they did in the previous year, and 30% report that they will spend more on travel than they did in the previous year. However, 31%. Let's look at this over time. So you have an understanding of what that 31% means in terms of a benchmark. So if we look at how that compares to previous summers and say, okay, Erin, it's not too bad. It looks pretty similar, just down very slightly. However, what gives us pause is that pattern that we've been used to, where there's a lull in the summer and then a rebound over the next 3 quarters, has not happened in 2019. Instead, we've had 3 straight quarters of decline in this metric. And similar story in spending, or actually a little bit more dire even. But we see that optimism for travel spending is clearly down for where it was just back in the summer of 2015. People like to question whether sentiment leads to actual behaviors. We've found in analyzing a lot of data that generally it does indeed. So if we look at the rolling average of trip volume that American travelers report in the year, the 3-year rolling average from 2016 to 18 was 4.2 leisure trips taken, and we see now in 2019 that is dipped to 3.9. However, American travelers do continue to largely report prioritizing spending on leisure travel, but unfortunately, the degree to which they are prioritizing leisure travel has fallen. So back in the winter of 2018, 34.8% said that in terms of their overall budget, leisure travel would be a high or extremely high priority, and we see that's fallen 5% now. And also travel budgets, reported travel budgets have also continued to decline, now at $3,200, where it was at $3,600 just 3 months ago. If we look at what is deterring Americans from traveling as much as they would like, largely it's the financial reasons, their own personal finances, the cost of gas, and airfare being too expensive. So everyone online, it's time to market smart. So let's look at what we know about some popular segments of American travelers. So we have data on lots of different American travel segments and audiences, but I have time today to just cover 4 that we thought would be most interesting for you. And that's Gen Z, so those are travelers between ages 15 and 24, leisure travelers, so those who have extended a business trip to accommodate leisure activities, peer-to-peer lodging travelers, so those that have used a peer-to-peer lodging service in the last year, like Airbnb. And then finally, visitor information center users, so those who have used an official destination marketing organization run visitor center in the last 12 months. So let's start with Gen Z. I'm actually the proud parent of a Gen Z. And again, these are travelers between 15 and 24 years of age. Right now, they represent 12.8% of traveling adult Americans. However, we will, of course, see that continue to grow. Some industries are fortunate enough, like housing apparently, to get to bypass marketing to millennials, it looks like, and go right to Gen Z. But one thing is for sure, if you're going to be successful with Gen Z, you better make sure that your brand is lit, as they say. So looking at their optimism for travel, they have high expectations for their trip volume as they look out over the next 12 months. And very similarly with spending, although not quite at the level of trips, they have large, or they think they have large travel budgets. What they have available to spend on leisure travel in the next 12 months exceeds all the other generations, topping out over $4,000. Demographically, largely what you would expect. So at this time, they're fairly young, so the vast majority of them remain single. A number of them have not yet had the opportunity to finish or attain higher levels of formal education. Very few of them at this time have their own children. However, they are extraordinarily ethnically diverse compared to other generations. You see 90% of American travelers that are baby boomers identify as Caucasian. Under half of Gen Z American travelers identify as Caucasian and instead represent other ethnicities. So incredibly diverse, as we've seen the United States continue to evolve as. Comparing Gen Z to baby boomers, they have actually surpassed baby boomers in their leisure trip volume, having taken 4.4 leisure trips in the last year. Very similar in the number of road trips, but they are much more likely than boomers to have traveled by air. We're 30% more likely, or 30% more likely to have taken an air trip, and they also are much more likely to have traveled abroad. Almost a third of them have traveled to a foreign destination in the last year. And just to introduce how we calculate the psychographics that I'll be presenting today. We have what we're called our traveler psychographic intensity indices. And these measure the importance of key concepts to travel. And what you're seeing here is the ones that we have been tracking for the last several years. And we ask a series of questions related to each. And then there is a scale, and there's a point structure. We have a 100-point scale that we use to track basically how intense someone is oriented to this particular traveler psychographic. So if we look at Gen Z, as we've seen since we started studying them, they are continuing to develop as travelers. So they are their psychographics around travel are not quite as strong as other generations or even segments. However, where they're really different than others is their desire for connectivity when they travel and their desire for exploration and newness. And just looking at their need for connectivity in detail, here's just one question we ask about their likelihood to stay connected to the network by checking texts or responding to texts or going online. And we see on a 1-week leisure trip, 56.9% of them are going to do that multiple times a day, compared to just 26.3% of baby boomers. We see their desire for exploration. It's incredibly important to them. I'm sorry, my slides are my slides are going more forward. But if you didn't catch that photo of a very beautiful beach photo of that family in all white outfits, that's not the picture that's probably going to capture a Gen Z's heart and get them lit up on your brand. But something like this, which is very new, and maybe touch on their desire for exploration, be far more successful with Gen Z. So just to recap, demographically different, so they're ethnically diverse, primarily single. Right now they have relatively lower income and educational attainment, but they have overtaken baby boomers in travel volume. And key for them psychographically is connectivity, exploration, and price sensitivity, given the number of trips they take. And then I would just remind everyone that this generation is coming of age in travel differently. All the things that you know about that generation and how they've grown up very incredibly connected and digitally connected, it's just going to make them a different type of travel consumer and how they approach and think about travel. So let's move on to leisure travelers. So again, these are those who have extended a business trip to accommodate leisure activities in the past year. Right now, we estimate that this represents 5% of all traveling adult Americans, but just over a quarter of business travelers. So certainly an important group of business travelers. They are younger than other travelers. They are more likely to be single compared to other travelers. As you might expect, they are quite likely to be educated and also more affluent. They are optimistic about travel, and they highly prioritize leisure travel, especially compared to other travelers. So 2/3 of them are going to make leisure travel a high or extremely high priority in their budget this year, compared to just 27.7% of non-leisure travelers. And they have very high expected travel budgets in the next year, topping out at over $4,200. Leisure travelers are much more likely than other travelers to have stayed in peer-to-peer lodging in the last year. Over 2/3 of them report having done that, and they are likely to continue this behavior as well. In terms of their psychographics, where we see the biggest differences are in culinary and cultural interests. We asked them, leisure travelers specifically, why they extended their business trips. You see the answer categories that we gave them here. And the average leisure traveler selected at least 3 of these answer choices. The most common were that they wanted to explore the destination. And I really like that stat because it just shows if you have this a strong leisure brand, how it can lead to additional economic impact for travelers from other segments like convention and business travel. Another most common reason was they simply wanted the chance to unwind or relax, and whatever destination they were in provided them the opportunity to do that. And then second tier, that they wanted to spend extra time with their companions and pass the costs on to employers or had friends or relatives in the area. And then from a marketing standpoint, I wanted to point out this finding here, which was about a quarter of them said that getting a great deal on an Airbnb or a great hotel deal was indeed why they were able or wanted to extend their business trip for leisure. So in summary, they are turned up for travel, they take more trips, they spend more, they have more enthusiasm for increasing travel, and they are culture and cuisine focused. All right, let's look at peer-to-peer lodging travelers. So these are American travelers who have stayed in an Airbnb or VRBO or similar in the last year, and that represents 28.4% of all traveling adult Americans. These travelers skew younger compared to other travelers, so 38 years of age on average. In terms of their demographics, slightly more likely to be single. They are more educated compared to other travelers, and fairly evenly split on gender, although skewing really slightly towards male, and just as likely to have children in their household. Where we see a big difference among this group is that they are much more likely to be city residents. So not necessarily your rural and suburbanites, but more likely to be in cities. And looking at their income and travel budgets, they are likely to be affluent. So 46.7% of peer-to-peer lodging users have annual household incomes above $80,000, and they expect to spend almost $4,500 on their leisure travel in the next year. As you might expect, they are also optimistic about their travel volume in the next year, as well as their spending. And they, again, have plans to continue to use these services over the next year, particularly compared to other travelers. And then this is a very high, frequently traveling group. So not only do they travel for business and extend their business trips to accommodate leisure, but they travel for leisure quite a bit too, reporting an average of five leisure trips in the last year. And these are air travelers. 80% of them have traveled by air in the last year. And these are global travelers. 4 in 10 of them have traveled outside the United States in the last year. In terms of where to find them, what media they're consuming in terms of travel, as you might anticipate, given their propensity to use peer-to-peer lodging, they really like a user-generated content. But they are also using print resources. They like official DMO websites. Almost half of them say that they have used an official DMO website. Interesting, I think, from a content perspective for those of you who manage a DMO website. And then very social, a lot of use of social media amongst this group for travel planning. And then looking at their psychographics, they're also cultural and culinary interest inclined. So our key takeaways, this is a very large segment of US travelers, which is something that we weren't able to say just a few years ago. They skew affluent, educated, and urban dwelling, and they're frequent travelers. They especially like to go overseas and really heavy consumers of a variety of digital travel content. Okay, and our final segment that we'll cover today, visitor information center users. And I know a lot of you in the audience are asking this question: who still uses visitor information centers? Is it just a handful of seniors and backpackers? Well, let me answer that for you. So 28.8% of American travelers have used an official DMO visitor center in the past year. It's a pretty significant group of travelers. And these people are super into travel content. So as you see, if we look at them compared to other travelers, they're using user-generated content, they're using print, they're using DMO websites, they're using social media. They are on their mobile phones far more than other travelers. So this isn't a inexperienced dinosaur of a traveler here. We see really big differences with them in terms of their travel planning resource usage. And they are not skewing older. In fact, they skew slightly younger, so 46.2 years of age on average. And in terms of their demographics, they are somewhat likelier to have children in their households. They are a little more educated, somewhat likelier to be urban dwellers, and actually going against stereotypes, they skew slightly male. You see these highlighted here. They are also affluent relative to non-visitor center users. They also have high expected travel budgets. And amongst the traveler segments that I presented today, they are the most frequent travelers, 5.3 leisure trips on average over the last year. They are also likelier air travelers, more globally minded in terms of travel, and big difference amongst visitor center users are they are much more likely than other travelers to have traveled with their own children in the last year, and also to have taken a multi-generational trip. So twice as likely to have traveled with their own children and significantly more likely to have taken a multi-gen trip. In terms of their psychographics, they are skewing highest for cultural interest, and this group is also indexing high for exploration hunger as well. So in summary, they are rabid travel information consumers, and that's where you'll find them. They're likely to be traveling with children and other family members and really driven by cultural experiences and travel. We will have many more traveler segment profiles available for you on destinationanalysts.com in the coming weeks. And of course, we'll be sending out this deck to you too. But thank you, and I hope you enjoyed that review of 4 very important traveler segments in travel marketing.
Thanks very much, Erin. We had a quick question from Katie. She was asking if you've got any sense of where Generation Z is located geographically. Where are they concentrated?
Oh, well, in terms of, Gen Z travelers, we would have a sense of that. And Katie, I'm sorry, I don't have the data set in front of me. But if you want to shoot me a quick email, I can certainly get that over to you. Very good. And we'll come back to additional questions a little bit later. Just 4 quick takeaways that we had having a look at this data. First, looking at traveller sentiment, it's clear, and it's been clear, in fact, for several quarters that there's increasing uncertainty about the outlook for the economy in general and travel. Things are just still generally robust, but this is exactly the time to be looking at your plan B. So how you can respond to whether it's a slow or a more sharp correction in terms of travel markets. And that can include everything from looking at visitors who might be more close to your market, more accessible, to also more shifting your marketing into more tactical focus. Secondly, we've got more tools and better research than ever before, and we've seen some of it today, to define and target your specific traveller segments. What's key there is identifying who are the travellers that are going to resonate most clearly with the proposition of your destination, so identifying very clearly who you're trying to talk to, and then personalising your story. And we'll see this a little bit more in terms of the information Kat's sharing, the ability to tell a very unique and powerful story that's personalised. The specific interests and outlook and behaviour of individual traveller segments is fundamental. And then in an increasingly fragmented, complex media landscape, it's more important than ever to have a real understanding of how you've got to reach people through a very complex media landscape, both online and offline. And a resource that we've summarized using State of the American Traveller research over the last decade is called the Hyper-Informed Traveller. And this is a white paper where we've aggregated 10 years of how travelers use different types of media and summarize the sort of major trends and takeaways. So that's available on our website. So without further ado, let's pass it over to Kat, and they've got some new and powerful research of their own to share today. Over to you, Kat.
Thank you so much, Chris, and thank you, Erin, for walking us through that research. I don't know about you guys, but I kind of nerd out on that kind of stuff. So I think it's amazing. And I'm really excited to be here and kind of offer what I hope is a complimentary look at some of the research we've done and how really understanding both why people do what they do, which is I think what we saw a lot of out of that first report. And then we take a look at kind of, okay, what are they doing, and marry those two together. And then as well, a little bit, we'll talk through how DMOs are really responding to all of this different change and all of what travelers are up to. So just if you haven't met before, my name is Kat. Nice to meet you. So I work at Sojourn, and if you're not familiar with what we do online advertising for the travel industry. So we use data to help us understand who to advertise to. And while this data is really helpful for that, we also use it to take a look at and understand travelers and produce thought leadership as a result from that. So last year we released a path to purchase report, and I'm just going to give you kind of one high level look and example of how we see travelers planning and doing their travel. And again, kind of if you understand more about who your traveler is and what their motivations are, and then see how they plan and search, that really helps see that whole path to purchase and helps you understand how to think about and sort of influence that. So one of the examples that we pull out in that report is this anonymous traveler named Eric. So Eric goes about a lot of travel planning that we see, and one of the very interesting parts about Eric is that he plans both business and leisure travel. And when he plans these different types of travel, he actually plans very differently. So when we see him planning his business travel, he's very economical in that planning. The hotels he looks at, the flights he looks at are very much economy. But when he goes and does his family planning, he actually has a much bigger budget and looks at more what we'd call like luxury travel when it comes to flights and hotels. And so knowing who your traveler is, like what that travel is that they're planning, here it's just business and luxury, but I think the leisure traveler, right, this blending of the two is even more important, or knowing which one they're doing is really important to understand how to engage with them, what's motivating them, and how you can influence them. So Eric plans this family travel over the total of 5+ months. And what we see him do is 451 touch points. And a touch point is just going on a website and doing a search, because maybe you go to one website, but you search it many, many different times, you hit many different pages, and so that's what touch points mean. And so we took a look and we broke it down by kind of category and segment. Now, one thing to call out is while we have, for instance, hotel and air, this is taking into account OTAs and metas and all of that, because this isn't just someone looking directly on a hotel website. But as we know, people use a lot of different websites to help them plan their trip. So what becomes really interesting and important to know is how much and how complex this path to purchase is. Because if someone like Eric is doing 451 touch points, 100 looking for hotels 113 different times in different ways, how are you engaging with them? How are you breaking through the noise? And I think what we saw is that knowing their motivation, knowing how to engage and influence them, that can actually be a really great motivator for being someone who does that personalization or who stands out amongst the crowd when someone like Eric is doing all their travel planning. And what we see too is that the amusement park, for instance, for Eric, becomes the real touch point or the cornerstone by which he looks for all of his different hotel and air and brand is shopping. And so just understanding sort of what are those key things, if it is the attraction in your destination that really you need to help sync up to all of the different offerings, is just an important thing to keep in mind. So this is what we see travelers doing when it comes to travel planning, but we wanted to know then how are DMOs and travel marketers responding to this complexity, to a new generation, to leisure, to all of these different things? So we actually just this year released our State of the Industry Travel Report, or what we nickname internally SOTI, if you haven't heard of it before. And what we did was we conducted, similar to how we interview travelers, we actually did a survey with DMOs, and we asked a number of questions about how are you responding to the traveler path to purchase. How are you thinking through your advertising? And we've broken that down into a lot of different segments. There's a hotel version, there's one by region, but I wanted to walk you through just some of the DMO particular highlights, as well as some of the travel marketing ones. So in general, 45% of travel marketers say that targeting travelers during a specific point along their path to purchase is a top marketing challenge. So I think this is really reassuring that almost half, or a good majority, understand how challenging the path to purchase is, and that it's really where travel marketers should be focusing. And I think one of the first places, as both Chris and Erin noted, is understanding your travelers. What motivates them? What influences them? If you don't know that, like, that's key one. And then key two is to know, where are they in their path to purchase? Are they at the dreaming phase, looking for what they're doing? Are they ready to book? Are they ready to plan? Right? And so it's really those two that become the important ways to kind of influence and motivate travelers. And so one of the very powerful ways that we see DMOs can do this and understand this as a challenge is through personalization, as Chris mentioned. So in our survey, 52% of DMOs say that delivering personalized ads and offers in real time is their top challenge. Now, why do you think this would be a top challenge? Again, I think this is the natural conclusion of, there's travelers are planning on more websites for more trips all at once, and there's all of these different travelers to keep in mind with all of these different motivations and sentiments around travel. And so making sure that you are influencing them with personalization is a real challenge once you understand that landscape. So I just wanted to give a few examples about how you could think about or maybe be inspired to reach them in this personalized way. So I hope this is going to show up with movement. Yes. Okay. So at Sojourn, I'm super stoked about this. We have developed an A/B testing platform for our advertisement. So what we do, particularly for our SMB customers, but this really expands, is we offer creative services. So we do the ads, and we're always testing to understand what is the best way to do this personalization in real time. And so we talked about, like, knowing where people are in the path to purchase is really important. So we've actually begun to do tests about, when you find dreamers, what is the best kind of messaging, imaging to really get them excited and inspired. And so one of the things we've begun to do is institute more HTML5 ads, which are these. They means they have movement in them. And we found that HTML5 ads have a 13% higher click-through rate. So people are actually more engaged when there's movement. They have an 8% higher conversion rate and a 13% higher search rate. So after someone sees an ad with movement, then they go and search for that thing, whatever the ad was, with the 13% higher. So it's super cool if you start to think about, if you're looking to inspire people, this word of, like, start exploring, right? And targeting people in that dream phase with messaging like that is super crucial, and actually we see has really great performance. Another example coming from our hotel side of the house, when people are in their planning stage, that kind of like getting them, you see the messaging change from exploring to booking, because you're trying to move them through that funnel. But it's still very sort of like high level with the question of ready for your Hawaiian retreat, right? It's beginning to pose to lure them, or kind of they've whittled it down to that, they're going to Hawaii and you want them to book with you. Thinking through some of this kind of alluring messaging is a really great way for some of that personalization. And then the final example is once they're in market. So we recently launched an offering for SMB attractions where we, like I mentioned earlier with the hotel side, we actually create the ads and run them and on our attraction clients' behalf. And so one of the things that has been really cool is taking learnings from hotel and applying it over. And so once someone is in market and looking for something to do, showing them, right, like this experience in a dynamic way. And right, this is for a family traveler. So this would be targeting particularly families. So it's really that combination of, like, if you know their influence and you know where they are, then having that messaging is through personalization can be really, really impactful and effective. And so I think that's why we are seeing 73% of DMOs plan on increasing digital ad spend in 2019, because it's really in digital where you can offer this personalization at scale and in real time. And so we see more and more that the DMOs are spending their budgets on digital. 48% are actually doing that. Now, what's interesting though is that it's not that as though DMOs are, flipping everything off and only going digital, which I think is important because that hyper-informed traveler that you mentioned, you guys noted that 49% of travelers are using print publications. So it's still a method for reaching and engaging travelers that DMOs need to take into account, but you might not get that personalization in real time at scale within print publications. So then where are DMOs allocating their budgets? We asked, and what we found is a really healthy mix across all of the digital channels. The majority is going to Facebook and Instagram. And again, I think that syncs up really well with the hyper-informed traveler, where you guys noted that 55% of travelers are using social media for travel planning. So having a healthy majority in Facebook and Instagram makes a whole lot of sense. But what I really think is cool about this is the diversity of channels that we see. And it really shows that if you understand the path to purchase as being so complex and people being on so many different websites, DMOs are responding and noting that they have to have a multi-channel approach as well. They have to be everywhere that customers are. So finally, I just wanted to leave you guys with this quote because I feel like it really merges what we're doing at Sojourn really well with what the data from Chris and Aaron show. And that is this quote from This is Athens. "You must shift your mind from airing your campaigns and waiting for your audiences to chase you. It's really important to find your audience and be there where they are most interested and engaged." So really the first thing is to understand who is your traveler, what motivates them, what excites them, what inspires them, and bring that through into your advertising to help influence them. And in order to do that effectively, you have to know where they are in their path to purchase. And so really it's bringing those two together that we see as being the most powerful.
Very good. Thanks a lot, Kat.
Oh, yes, my pleasure.
Some powerful reminders there about fundamentally travel and destination marketing is about telling stories that engage and inspire, and then connecting the dots to make that travel possible. So just a reminder, please ask questions. I've been answering a number of them online, and so you can see in the question box a number of answers already that we've shared with people such as Gary and Katie, etc. Just a few resources, and I'll come to those questions. We reminded you right at the start that on the Miles Partnership website and Destination Analyst, you'll be able to access the research report, plus the slides, plus there'll be a webinar recording, and 24 hours after the webinar today, we'll be sending out a reminder of all those resources to everyone who registered. So you can share the recording with anybody in your organization who was perhaps unable to join us today. We have got a very special edition of the State of the American Traveler coming up on Wednesday, November the 20th. We've actually reshaped our 4 quarterly editions. You might remember in past years we looked at mobile, but mobile now is such a critical and central part of everything we need to talk about in the digital sphere. We've integrated that into the sort of technology area as well as our other research, and we're going to be using the special edition to take a close look at destination management, such as congestion, crowding, and other impacts caused by the growth of tourism. So this was a hot topic at Destinations International. It was a hot topic at ESTO and the European Cities Marketing Conference that I spoke at a couple of months ago. In fact, it's a hot topic around the world. We're going to take the opportunity to ask specific questions of US leisure travelers on their attitudes and outlook on these issues, including how they look at factors such as crowding or congestion, how they respond to traveller care codes and other communications around how they can travel more responsibly, and a range of other issues. We'll actually be reaching out to you, getting your feedback on the areas of destination management that are going to be most pertinent. And so look for that email in the next couple of weeks, and we'll be shaping the questions and sharing the answers with you on November the 20th. We've also got some fabulous resources from the big Destinations International Conference, which was held in St. Louis in July. I think people may well be familiar that we've been running for the last 8 years now the Global All Stars So this is a showcase of speakers from around the world sharing the latest ideas, inspiration, and insights. This year we had 3 fabulous speakers, and a range of resources are available from each of them. Mark Elwood, Sine Jorgested, and Alan Cohn talked about trust in multiple dimensions. Trust in the future, what's reshaping the travel and tourism industry, trust in place, the whole issue of building and maintaining trust with your community, with your businesses, with your legislature, etc., and trust in brand. And so starting the week of September the 9th, I also should mention the breakout workshop we had on Global All Stars, where Sina and Mark were joined by Kim Farron from Boulder and Graham Budd from Destination Queenstown, looking at hot topics in destination management and looking at 4 specific case studies. So the resources from the breakout and the main stage are all going to be available the week starting September the 9th. There'll be a range of video recordings and a blog series of key takeaways that we'll be sharing with you. And this is just a small part of the research resources we've got available online. We've just launched a research library that's all available in one place. That's available at milespartnership.com/research. And that includes the research from today. We've also got a webinar series library. So we've now got dozens and dozens of webinars on specific topics, including what we call spotlight editions, which are shorter, sort of 5 to 10 minute little segments that you can look at on particular topics of interest. They're all available on our website, and that includes our blog, which looks at some of the latest issues that are being considered and dealt with in our industry. So let's get to a few questions. Erin, we had a question for you about just outlining a little bit more detail. You had 2 images, the image that you referenced on the beach that I think you quickly went through, the family all in white. In fact, they were all white, I believe. And then the inspirational image, I think it was from Namibia, and that sense of exploration. Can you just elaborate on what was the sort of counterpoint to those 2 images in terms of resonating with Generation Z?
Sure. And it was an attempt to be funny, but with also making the point about what we found in the research. So like I said, Gen Z is, and especially those that are traveling Americans, are really ethnically diverse. And right now they're single, and they're also psychographically got, as you might expect with a young person, that desire for new and to explore the world. And so I think that was the point of the all Caucasian family on the beach is probably not going to pull at their heartstrings the way now we thought that ad was kind of clever as for Namibia, and it said visit Saturn because it's such the landscape there is just so different from what you might find in the US or somewhere else. And so we thought that would be that image in particular would probably test very well amongst Gen Z.
Yes, I would add to that with Generation Z, it really highlights an issue that's always, frankly, been a factor with communicating with travelers from minority communities, that we can be somewhat blind or oblivious to what can be very important messaging. And this can be very important in terms of international marketing as well, particularly visitors from the likes of China, etc. They want to see imagery with visitors who look like them being welcome and hosted in your community. So yes, whether you're talking to domestic or international, testing your imagery with the appropriate target segments, very, very important.
Yes, and that's really, I just want to hammer on that again, because it surprises me how much tourism advertising I see so without diversity considered in it. And I'm very fortunate. I'm actually Gen X, so the generation no one cares about it. I get to work amongst a lot of millennials, and also we have a Gen Z, and then I also get to work with the other principal of Destination Analyst, who's a baby boomer. So I feel like I get to observe all these generations. But one thing I have observed about millennials, both here in our office and then out with amongst our clients, is they will notice when there is not diversity in marketing and advertising. I think my generation, we grew up kind of expecting there not to be, and it doesn't bother us or we don't note it as much, but they definitely notice it. And we hear it when we interview travelers as well, to what you were saying, Chris. People want to see people that look like them so that they know that they'll be welcome and accepted.
Yes, yes, and they're also very sophisticated media consumers, so they want to see authenticity. So basically travelers who look like them rather than staged models. I've noticed with my daughters both, they're incredibly attuned to the diversity of what travelers look like, but also, is it staged or is it authentic?
Right, and they're becoming more cognizant. I mean, I quickly showed that Ad Age article in this presentation, but apparently Gen Z is also becoming more cognizant of that stage thing with influencers. So apparently you have to be very careful now with even their influencer marketing coming across as inauthentic.
Yes. Kat, a question for you. So you mentioned DMOs are spending more money on social media platforms such as Facebook and Instagram. So Leah's asking, YouTube is an important channel for Gen Z. So what's your perspective on them as on YouTube and other online video channels as a way to connect with that market segment?
Yeah, I think it's just kind of what you ended there, Chris, with. It's one of the video marketing channels that I think people should consider. While I think video is a very important media for destinations in particular, especially if you're looking to inspire. Like, that's one of the reasons why we started adopting more, like the HTML5 is a type of video, or we can actually turn things into videos, because they are so powerful in how they can engage and influence travelers. Now, when you put a video in a video, like on a YouTube where people are already expecting a video, I think that it can be effective, but it can be also viewed as more disruptive sometimes. And so things like doing video in Facebook and other places are where people experience some video content, but some static content as well, can be a great way to kind of engage with people. I think the other thing that I'm interested in too, along the terms of video, is connected TV, and to what extent we'll even begin to push video in that aspect. So I think YouTube should be one part of a video strategy, but I don't think it should be the only part, just because of how diverse or the websites and the type of video content that people engage with is. But I'd be curious also to hear what your and Aaron's take is on video.
Yes, we in fact just had Google come into our offices and share some of the latest research. Of course, they're very bullish on video. Yeah. Traditionally it's been seen as a much more sort of powerful at the inspirational dreaming phase, but some of the changes in YouTube more recently allow a more direct call to action to be available on the platform for people to respond right there and then. And so there's actually a range of interesting, more tactical sort of advertising options that are certainly worthy of testing. But just to emphasize the key takeaways from the Hyper-Informed Traveler, you've got to have a very diverse and multimedia approach to your media planning in terms of communicating messages across multiple platforms. What would you add, Aaron?
Apologies that I didn't have this in the deck, but it will certainly make the data available. If those of you that remember when we looked at Gen Z for the first time a year ago, one of the things that was a big difference of them compared to millennials, it was, and Kat pointed out, YouTube. the Gen Z travelers, their use of YouTube was far greater than millennials, and then of course of other generations, and then also Snapchat. So that short, quickly disappearing video. And I thought that was fascinating because, again, like I was pointing out, I mean, these are, if you think about how they're coming of age themselves and travel, I mean, they are consuming YouTube so much. So that's going to be a go-to place for them for other, once they start even traveling more. And then also that short video format.
Yes. Let's just take one final question, and I think it's an important one. Gary was asking specifically about how to understand visitors coming into their welcome centres that are interested in specific areas. He was asking about genealogy and the increasing number of travellers who are interested in their sort of history and heritage. But I suppose that raises a broader question in terms of, you've got some overall figures you've shared, Erin, on the importance of visitor centres. How would a individual DMO or chamber go about collecting information to be able to demonstrate the importance of their own visitor centres, so they can complement that with specific numbers that they could share with their stakeholders? Because I think increasingly those questions are being asked about the numbers and the importance and the relevance of welcome centres and information centres.
Sorry, Chris, but the question was how should they be able to talk about the importance of them?
Yes, and how could they do their own individual research to understand the usage of their own specific visitor centres?
Okay, I love this question. First of all, you have this national data that we make available to you, so you can go and say, like, look how many travelers are using visitor information centers. And then your visitor information center is a gold mine for you to be able to do your own research. So you don't even have to spend money or hire companies like ours. Just write a good questionnaire and go in and ask people. And certainly, I know we've done this, but if you have questions on how important the visitor information center was towards the overall destination experience, how much more satisfied they feel with the experience in your destination after having used it. Anyway, gathering metrics like that, I would think about that and then go out and just survey and talk to your visitors at those welcome centers.
Yes, and that would be a chance then, Gary, to also ask specific questions of interest, such as genealogy. Okay, well, let's wrap it up there. I want to give special thanks again to Erin and the whole team at Destination Analysts that make the State of the American Traveller possible, and Kat and her colleagues at Sojourn and the wonderful insights they shared today. We'll be in contact with you tomorrow with the resources from today's webinar, and we look forward to connecting with you on November the 20th for our 4th quarterly special edition, as well as catching up at industry events. So have a wonderful rest of your day. If you're here in the United States, a great long weekend, and we wish you all the very best. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.